We like to call it no dream snuffing. Do not snuff anybody's dreams.
We've been supporting this person for X number of years, and we never heard that they wanted to go on a cruise or...
A woman who was in her 80s, and she said she wanted to get her driver's license. Well, where's the first place that you'd go if you got your driver's license? And she said, well, I go to the grocery store, and then I go see my sister. They didn't know she had a sister.
A lot of organizations, say, well, we're a learning organization. Well, if you're truly a learning organization, it's because you're listening to people.
I want to hear from you and from your perspectives. What do high retention organizations do differently? Hello, and welcome to IDD Leader, where each week I help you kick staff turnover to the curb and build the kind of workplace that attracts and retains the best people in human services. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. Do you know what your DSPs want? I'm not talking about what the orientation checklist said, and I'm not talking about the tools they need to do their job. I'm saying, do you know what they want out of their role, their career, maybe even their life? If your honest answer is somewhere around not really, then good news, you're not alone. But that gap between what organizations assume and what staff would say if someone took the time to ask them, it turns out to be maybe one of the biggest drivers of turnover that almost no one is measuring. This is one part that comes up in my conversation today with leaders from the Council on Quality and Leadership. I've got Kay Rizzolo, Katherine Dunbar, Courtney Chapman back for part 2 of my conversation, my interview with them. And in this part of the conversation, they talk about the data behind staff dignity and retention outcomes, what high retention organizations are actually doing on the ground, and the concept of personal outcome measures. It's a discovery tool that CQL uses that's turned up some really stunning things, including a woman in her 80s whose one goal was to get her driver's license. Stick around for that one. Well, without further ado, let's get into it. This podcast, we talk a lot about workforce issues. I mean, that really is the central focus of IDD Leader. And so, but that's actually, it was providers who had they're having exceptional outcomes with their staffing that I noticed a trend that not all, but many were CQL accredited. And so talk to me about this connection, whether it's maybe it's the personal outcome measures, maybe it's the basic assurances, if I even have the right terminology here. But when an organization is getting serious about quality, what tends to happen with staff stability or with supervisor experience or even just the employee experience in general?
We do a lot of research. We have so much data. So we've got the data from the basic assurances. We've got the data from personal outcome measures. We've worked with some entities to get other like utilization data so that we can look and see what's the impact on personal outcomes if you have good quality services or vice versa. How are they connected? And we do look at workforce issues. And one interesting thing that we found was that when you treat your staff with dignity, respect, and fairness, that trickles down to the people that you're supporting. And so we found that when organizations do that, the people they support, they're more likely to be free from abuse and neglect. They're more likely to exercise their rights, which is a big one. Mm-hmm. They're more likely to make choices, including where they live and who they live with and what services they get, which surprisingly, that should be a choice for everybody, but it's more likely when you're treating your staff well. And they're more likely to realize personal goals and to feel respected. So it's really important how you treat your staff because we know that it trickles down.
Yeah. And making sure that staff feel like they're valued, that their voices are heard, that they have input, and really leaning on the staff, the DSPs, the supervisors, the home managers, that they're a part of the team and they're a vital part of the team. So that's important.
Yeah.
We also spend time.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. During the accreditation process, we also spend time with DSPs and the frontline supervisors. We also spend time with leadership, but we specifically have focus groups with people receiving services, direct support professionals, depending on the type of organization. So if it's like a case management only entity, then we would spend time with case managers. Also, and then the frontline supervisors were added to that mix a few years ago because it's key to hear from frontline supervisors, we learned. And we learn a lot from those focus groups. And we use it to inform, the decisions that we're making when it comes to the basic assurances. So I probably one of my favorite parts of accreditation is doing those focus groups.
Mine too.
You learn so much, and they have so much to say. And they love, to have an audience and to be included and, happy to share their experiences. So I think a lot of that is.
Yeah. And one of the things that we hear in the focus groups that they want is more like staff development. And so they want more training just to be able to do their job better. And this is one of the interesting kind of research studies that we have. And we've got all of these on our website. But we found that when organizations did have that ongoing staff development, so they had, continuing education and they were asking staff what training they wanted, they were seeing better outcomes in terms of those like traditional healthcare metrics. So there was less ER visits, there were less injuries, there were less incidents of abuse and neglect. So if if your staff feel better able to do what they're charged with doing, then it's better quality supports, better lives for people.
Yeah, that makes sense to me from not just in a trickle down kind of way, but even just at face value, if someone is competent and confident in their work, it's completely different than if someone feels like they're thrown into coverage and they're
Right.
facing complex needs that they don't feel well equipped to be able to help support or manage, or they're, just trying to figure things out. So, I mean, that I'm not surprised to hear the kind of the correlation uh, data there. It probably is cause and effect, even if we can't prove it from a scientific
Yeah,
standpoint. It probably is, but
but
let
there's something going
there's
on there.
something going on there. Now, not to put you guys on the spot with this, do you have any? Has there been any measurement of something suppose such as like quantitative data around staff retention with your involvement, like day one when you guys show up at organizations versus organizations that have gone through accreditation multiple times or multiple cycles? Has that ever been highlighted? And it's okay if it's not. I just thought I'd go out on a limb and ask.
No, but we have found that there's some sort of correlation between staff retention and people, and this makes sense, participating in the community and um, establishing and maintaining meaningful relationships, because it's really the staff that are helping people to get out there and to meet people and to really keep those relationships going. So um, DSP retention is important, and that continuity and security is really important in people's lives and is tied to better outcomes.
Well, I think it all connects too. You got to think if you're a person receiving services and your DSP has been with you, say, 5 years, they know you much better than someone who just started working 6 months ago, right? Not that the person working 6 months ago can't get there, but there's something to be said about that time spent, that relationship building, that really understanding, listening, learning, observing. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Have you found that, or I guess I say it this way: what have you found? Who suffers the most when an organization is having a hard time with quality?
People receiving services is the clear answer, but I think also the quality of supports equals quality of life, right? And I think that when certainly, direct support professionals and that, frontline leaders, I think they probably suffer the most because it is, or absorb it the most. I want to say suffer, because they are, everything trickles down, So if an organization is reacting, to something, instead, especially a negative event, then all that's going to, trickle down and affect everyone else at the organization. So, it's always best to be proactive, of course. But, it's that, I think it's definitely around the quality of those supports. And if that goes down, then quality of life goes down. And you could say that for all of us, the better, interactions I have, the more, social capital I have, the better my life is. So, we have to say that you can say that about everyone.
Yeah.
Sure.
And when we're looking at staff development, we're also looking at, are they talking to the staff to find out what do they think the gaps in training are? Because a lot of times you do that onboarding, that 40 hours, and then you've got your annual refreshers. But are they providing training on best practices, or are they asking, what training do you feel like you need to help you do your job? So,
Yeah. Now I'm on a hunt, and I continue to be on this hunt, and I've been experiencing a lot of organizations doing a lot of different things. But I want to hear from you and from your perspectives. What do high retention organizations do differently? Not just kind of at that. You could say things like there's more open communication. That's a true statement. You could say like the culture's healthier, but I mean maybe a little bit more strategically or even tactically. What have you seen for those organizations that really are nailing it with their staff? Their staff are really engaged. What do you see that strikes you with your broader view of lots of different organizations? What stands out?
They listen.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Kate, you in my head.
No,
You are in my head.
Sorry,
That's
Kate.
what I was just about to say. Yeah, they listen. And tell me if you guys agree with this, Kate, Mary Kay. But I think training is important. You're making sure they're fully prepared, or as prepared as you can get them before you send them out, making sure that people are trained. And then the other thing I think that we see a lot of is like mentor programs. So when somebody is brand new to the field, pairing them with someone who's experienced, and that's sort of their person that kind of just anything you need, you call me or I'm here for you. That works really, really well. And then, like Kate said, listening, getting feedback, talking to folks, and taking that information, not to just hear people talk, but taking it to process it and do something with it. And so that I think anything else y'all can think of? That's just what popped in my head.
I think closing the loop is part of that listening. You've got to prove yourself. If you're going to ask me, for my opinion or for advice, I guess, or something, if you're going to ask me what I think the problem is and how to solve it, then close that loop and come back to
Oh,
me
I
and
like
say
that.
how it happened. How did I do that? If you're going to do a satisfaction survey, we see this all the time. You do a satisfaction survey every year, but all you do is fill it out and that's it. There's nothing else happens at the organization. Organizations that do a really good job of, retaining staff have a constant feedback loop, and they're saying, okay, these are the results of the survey that you did. Not just that, but this is what we're going to do about it. We're going to come back to you and we're going to say, okay, so it sounds like you guys really want to see these things that, to help you feel valued. You want your managers trained better. You want meaningful incentives. You want meaningful recognition. What is meaningful to you? Are you asking staff questions about what is meaningful to them? Because it's all about the staff feeling valued, and if you value your staff.
Yeah. And that ties along with like various initiatives like NADSP trainings and
Mm-hmm.
those certifications, and just
Absolutely.
putting resources into your staff, making sure that they are recognized, celebrating successes, organizations that do that. I did a focus group not too long ago with the organization, and it was so simple, but the staff were just geeked about it, and they had me geeked. But they were just talking about like when they do something within a 3-month period, like everything is running smoothly, those type of things, and they get everything done, training is done, all of these things, they're meeting outcomes, all of these things. They get all of the staff together from certain homes, and they have like a little party. So it's people supported staff, and they just enjoy being around each other. And it was simple. It was like pizza and chips and cookies, but it's just being around each other and fellowshipping with each other. They love that. I'm like, well, shoot, I want to come. Invite me to the next one. So it's things like that recognition, just saying, hey, we see you. Kudos. You've done a great job. That goes a long way.
And it's just taking that time, that time to recognize someone or time to ask them a question. Hey, you just started. How are things going? And genuinely, I'm going to keep repeating myself, sorry, but genuinely just listening, to what that person is saying and doing something with that information, So
I think it's important too to have kind of a safe space at work where they can make a mistake and they're not going to get in trouble for it.
100%.
That's a good one. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
Because I feel like a lot of DSPs don't feel like they can do things without getting prior approval from somebody, and it may be something that doesn't need that prior approval, but you got to empower them to be able to feel like they can make a decision. And if they make a mistake, that's fine. That's how you learn. So that's something I think that improves retention. And Kate, you said something that made me think of that closing the loop and doing like the surveys. We say no action without data, but no data without action.
Yes.
So don't collect data and then don't do anything with it, because why bother, right? So that's something we preach a lot.
That needs to be a T-shirt, Mary Kay.
There we go. We got it. You guys you're getting your slogans are getting a list of them built out right now today.
Both. Those are T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's just a lot of organizations, say, well, we're a learning organization. Well, if you're truly a learning organization, it's because you're listening to people and you're listening to what they have to say and then doing something with that information. I think all of us who do accreditation work, which is almost everybody at CQL, really say that to organizations. Make sure you're learning and then doing something based on that learning. So,
because some organizations collect data just because they've been collecting it for 20 years. It doesn't tell them anything, and staff are frustrated because they don't know why they're collecting it. So kind of stepping back, it kind of goes back to that, the why. Why are we doing this? What is it telling us?
talking to people to see what their goals are. What do you want to learn? It's not every DSP doesn't want to be a manager.
Right.
Frontline management was probably the hardest job I ever did.
And not every DSP makes a good frontline supervisor, and that's okay. I mean, some people don't want to do that. So, and Courtney has talked about this before, the kind of performance punishment, that if you're a good DSP, sometimes you get promoted whether you want that position or not, just because you've shown yourself to be dependable. And so they plop you into a position that maybe you're not trained for, or maybe you just have no interest in. Maybe you just love being a DSP and you want to stay as a DSP, but then you're put into this other role. And then sometimes that could lead to some turnover, unintended turnover, because you're trying to reward somebody for doing a good job, but yet it kind of backfires.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of the accidental supervisor syndrome.
Yes.
That's it. Wait a second. I didn't realize I signed up for that too,
Yeah, this is not what I wanted.
But yeah. I think you guys brought up a lot of great things with what you just shared. The listening piece, closing the loop. I mean, that's huge because it's easy if something does come up in a satisfaction or engagement survey that then there's all these talks around the table at leadership, but the people on the front lines may not actually hear those talks, and some of those things might not lead to initiatives. Some of them probably will, but the ones that don't, then they just feel like, well, I said it and nobody cared. And so then you've actually, it can almost be counterproductive to ask it and then not to close the loop. So I think that was a really great point as well. I'm curious through whether it's just from your work with organizations, especially the accreditation, but really any way, shape, or form that you guys are intersecting organizations. What's what's something that you see that I guess that, or that when you're, I'm sorry, I'm tripping over myself with this question. Let me try that again. Particularly through the accreditation, as you're kind of holding up a mirror to organizations, what what often do you see that surprises them when they start to dig into the data or when they start to make it more meaningful?
Workforce, our DSP and frontline supervisor focus groups, they give a lot of great information. And sometimes organizations are surprised by what they hear. And sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes they're like, oh, wow, they really appreciate that we did that, or they recognize that we're trying to really support them. And sometimes we may not feel like we're doing a good job because we've got all of these kind of barriers. But then other times it's something that maybe the staff aren't comfortable sharing until they're in a focus group where we make it clear that everything is anonymous. We're not going to say your
Yeah.
name. And so that gives us an opportunity to share some opportunities or things that an organization might want to address that could be concerns for frontline supervisors or for DSPs that they may not have heard otherwise. And sometimes I hope that by them hearing some of that, they think, we probably need to get a system in place for them to give us feedback because CQL is not going to come and do a focus group all the time. Although we did do a webinar where we taught people how to do focus groups and how important they were so that they can start doing them at their organizations themselves.
I think from the person supported standpoint, my experience over the many years I've been doing this work is I've heard organizations say when we do a person outcome measures, which we call the POM, they'll say, we've been supporting this person for, X number of years, and we never heard that they wanted to go on a cruise. Or it's just interesting when they hear this information, and 9 times out of 10, they're like, we're going to figure out how to make it happen because they're so surprised by it. And so it's always fun, and I just enjoy it. It's like a light bulb comes on, and it's just like, wow, and you just, even staff, I've had DSPs tell me, he's never said that to me. I never knew that. I had one person that I supported I was doing the person outcome measures interview, and she's a person supported, and she said she had 2 daughters that she hadn't seen since they were children, and she was in her late 60s at that time. And so when I talked to staff said, "What?" And so then immediately went into action, like, we've got to figure this out. So that kind of stuff is really cool. Gives you kind of goosebumps a little bit,
Mhm.
right? Because you're gathering information, but you're also learning something to help change that person's life or impact that person's life in a huge way. And that's just really cool to me.
And a similar one, somebody was doing a personal outcome measures interview and they were talking to a woman who was in her 80s and they were talking about her goals. And she said she wanted to get her driver's license. And the person kept going with the conversation and shared, and asked more about it and said, well, where's the first place that you'd go if you got your driver's license? She said, well, I'd go to the grocery store. And she was like, oh, that's cool. And she said, then I'd go see my sister. They didn't know she had a sister. And so if they hadn't kept that conversation going, and we like to call it no dream snuffing, like
Mhm.
do not snuff anybody's dreams, find out what it is that they really want about that and what appeals to them, and then see what you can do to make something happen that's going to get them closer to it. But
Yeah.
so many good things that you find out through the personal outcome measures interviews. Just,
Yeah. I love like, I am a believer in the palms because it is that one-on-one conversation where that person is just you and them, and you're just talking, and all kinds of cool stuff comes out. Sometimes, you hear things that are sad and, stuff like that. But even still, it's things that you can do something with. It's a way to support. It's a way to, so yeah, the
yeah.
palms are awesome.
And we think that you should find out people's outcomes, like what they want, before you start providing services. Because you could
Mhm.
be providing just a whole array of services that they don't want or they don't need. And you could be focusing your efforts more on those kind of
Yep.
important ones that would really make an impact on their life.
Absolutely. I want to hear if any of you can think of a story where an innovative practice, particularly as it relates to workforce, it's, I mean, there's some that are kind of best practice, very well known, but just something that's maybe a little outside the box that you saw an organization do and it was having any kind of good results that you were like, wow, that's a really cool thing that you guys are doing.
Person-centered planning for the staff.
Tell me more.
I think so. They saw how person-centered planning was working for the people that they were providing supports to. And so they started doing that same, not like big team meetings and things like that, but really focusing on the staff and how that staff wanted to develop within their role, but also within their, their whole life. Is there something they wanted to learn? They talked to staff about, what things they do that make them happy, what parts of their job they really love, what do they want to learn. They really took person-centered planning and made it holistic to the organization. So every staff, didn't matter, no matter what your title or role is, you had a plan. So it wasn't about just performance. It was about you. It was about how you wanted to grow and learn and contribute and give back and all those things. So that's probably the coolest thing I've heard recently.
And Courtney probably has a ton of stories, but we've got lots of things on our website that go by recruitment best practices and retention, recognition, and we highlight organizations and what they're doing, and they submit a story about whatever initiative they have, and they do it where they list out steps for how you could recreate it. So that's, if you get a chance to look at that, there's some good things there.
Yeah, and I'll definitely link that up in the show notes as well, so anyone that's listening can easily find it. Well, let me ask you this. Well, maybe we'll kind of land the plane with this one. But if the leader is listening right now to this conversation and they really hadn't considered CQL accreditation, what's the one thing you'd want them to believe differently about their organization's potential as it relates to what you guys have discovered going through this process with so many organizations?
I think it comes back to meeting organizations where they're at, and working with them in a true partnership. We're not out to get you. We're going to celebrate those good things that you're doing. We're going to learn about you, and you're going to learn about what some other agencies are doing. So you can learn about new practices and different innovative practices, things like that.
Yeah, I think the collaboration is probably one of the big things I would say, that is so important. And, sometimes as directors of an organization, you're juggling so much and trying to get things done. And so when you think about accreditation, you're thinking, oh my goodness, we got to do this, this, and this. And so it becomes this long list of things that just adds to the, already full list, right? But in walk CQL, and this is my own personal experience, and it's like, let's just sit down and talk about it. Let's put it all on the table, and you feel that for me, it was like, okay, somebody that's here to help and support me. I think that's key, that support piece, right? That you don't feel like you're getting beat up, but that we're working together. We're right here with you. We're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to support and help you figure it out. And that just gives you that burst of energy to say, you know what, we can do this. And let's embrace this. So that was my experience when I walked into the accreditation process as a state system.
I think you talked to Core Services,
I sure
right,
did, yeah.
Nate? And so Susan Arwood, who used to be their CEO, she said something that has just stuck with me for years. And she said, people don't want a good plan. They want a good life. And I feel like that's what we're going in to help you figure out how to make sure people are having good lives. That's what it kind of all boils down to.
That's yeah, I love the simplicity of that. And I hear a common thread through our conversation has really been, I don't think has said this explicitly, but you're not alone. If you're leading an organization, you're only alone if you choose to be alone. That there is help and support and tools, not just kind of like well, all right, glad to hear what it's like in the trenches. Go back in there. But there's actually tools and to help things get smoother, to help things get better. And I think that can be an important message because I know thankfully not in my current season, but there was a whole season where I was in a leadership role where I felt much more alone than I wanted to. I felt, and probably hung out to dry might be actually the more accurate term, because some stuff was definitely hitting the fan at that moment. And so it was feeling like, oh my, how are we going to get through this one? And so I hear that the work that you guys are doing, it's not just about putting a stamp of approval on an organization that's already strong so that they can just have yet one more badge or one more stamp of approval, but it's really about helping organizations get from point A to point B and from point B to point C, and sort of a continuous improvement process with shared wisdom across a wide breadth of research and best practices across this whole field, which I think is phenomenal. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. I also appreciate your time today for this interview, and thank you so much for what you've shared. Wow. Mary Kay said something near the end of the conversation that I keep thinking about. No data without action. In other words, don't ask your staff how they're doing, collect the responses, share them at a leadership meeting, and then move on. Listen, I think we've all ridden the good intentions bus, but it's time to get off of that bus. It's not really listening. It's the appearance of listening, but your staff, they feel that difference vividly. Here's your action move for this week, and I always try to leave you with one. If you've done an engagement survey, a pulse survey, satisfaction survey, anytime in the last year, and you didn't fully close the loop with your staff on what you heard and what you're doing about it, it's time. It's probably past time, but it's time right now. Even this week. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to roll out a big initiative. It could be a 5-minute team huddle, and you just are saying, hey, here's what you told us, and here's one thing we're going to try. That single action can build more trust than all of the survey analysis ever did. Now, if you want links to CQL or their resources, you can check all that out in the show notes. And also, one other resource I want to highlight for you. A lot of times, frontline staff get promoted because they were the best DSP, and then they're faced with, oh, wait, now I manage a team of people? How does that work? It's not that they don't understand it conceptually, it's that the skill set is actually different. So I created a resource that helps identify 7 trouble spots and then what to do to solve those so that they don't end up accidentally burning out their team. You can get that at iddleader.com/burnout. Now, if this conversation resonated with you, 2 things I would ask you to consider doing. One would be share it with somebody. Share it with someone on your team. It can hopefully help encourage and inspire them as much as it has for you. And secondly, wherever you're listening to this or watching this, like it, rate it, leave a review, any of those things. It just helps with discoverability so that other leaders in our field can find out they're not alone. There are resources, and many times more resources than we realized, that are just one click away. Well, until next time, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.